Hello everyone, it's 5 a.m. here in the Philippines. I've only just got up. Flipping heck. I reckon it must be about 10 o'clock at night in England, something like that. I hope the audio is all working properly. Anyway, by the way, look at the old t-shirt. See what car that is? Thanks, Vivian. This is actually the first time I've worn this. So I thought I'd put it on tonight, since we're talking about cars, which is a bit of a rarity at the moment. The flipping cockerels here won't shut up. So if you keep hearing them going off, then there's nothing I can do about it, and I don't have a gun to shoot them. I'd normally go out on the porch, but it's so dark still, so I might go out there later when the sun's out properly. What I'll go through a couple comments, then I'll get into this a little bit, because I've got a little bit to get through. So I don't want to spend too much time answering comments today. ST200, hello. Hint, the answer is not to just cut it out and replace it with a straight bit of pipe. By the way, despite all the smoky transit vans I see on the road. Oh, you know what we're going to be talking about, do you? Kind of guessed, did you? Craig, hello. Nice to see a car video. Mate, hope you are all doing well over there. Yeah, well, I didn't plan this. It just happened. I'll come to it in a minute. David, is it now? Ian, buy an EV. Not over here, you wouldn't. Bloody hell. Although, however, I have seen a mobility scooter over here going down the highway. I found that highly amusing, actually. Oh my God. Oh. There's some kind of huge... Ken? There's a big beetle just come in. Whoa. There's a massive... Yeah, as long as it's not a cockroach. Yeah, it's a huge beetle.
Oh. You want me to catch it?
Well, no, well, get rid of it. I don't want it running in. I don't care if it bites, I just don't want it running into me. Like, I might be talking and it might end up in my mouth. I'm telling you, the insects out here.
Shoot him. Is it? It's visible?
A bit higher.
Higher, like that?
There. Look at that. There, that's it. Steady there. Look at that.
It's tingle, but
yeah.
It doesn't burn.
I don't like them. Anyway, that was a bit like a stop oil protester running across and pouring yellow, something called... Anyway, let me get on. Kay, take it off, get a professional welding outfit to cut it and weld it back up. Get it remapped, but said DPF back on with all the plumbing and wiring bobs. Your I'm going to get to this, but 1 minute. Ken, can you put the aircon on for a minute? Oh, it's too stuffy in here. I'm not putting the oscillating fan on because I know what it's going to do. It's just going to mess with the audio. It's going to keep blowing it. And Paul, no DPFs in the Philippines. We are still on Euro 4. Over here, they do an emission test on vehicles, depending how old your vehicle is. So they are quite stringent on the emission tests. But to see most of the vehicles over here, especially where I am, it's the lorries are very old. A lot of the vehicles are very old in the right state. So it's like how I don't really know. A lot of them are kicking out tons of smoke. So it's not like the UK at all. Right, here is the scenario. One of my friends, he called me and he said to me, I've got this problem. My engine light on it's got a Citroen. I'm not going to go into the vehicles. This is pretty much irrelevant. But he's got a Citroen and his engine management light came on and he took it to a Citroen garage. I think he took it to 2 garages and they both told him his AdBlue tank was faulty. Apparently on these Citroens, Peugeots, some of these AdBlue tanks are a bit problematic. They're a common cause for failure. So he said, well, how much is that going to cost me to fix it? Because his vehicle is not that old. So in excess of £2,000. So he's like, bloody hell, that's quite expensive bill just for a little tank. Although these AdBlue tanks, they're sometimes quite large, and there's a little bit more involved in them than just a tank that holds AdBlue. So he was speaking to some other mechanic who said, oh, well, you don't have to pay that out. I know somebody who can remap your ECU to get rid of the software for the AdBlue, so the engine ECU won't see the AdBlue tank, and if it can't see it, it can't bring up a fault code for it. So he said that to me, and I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute, it's not that simple. That the AdBlue is squirted into the DPF to aid clearing the soot out of the DPF. If AdBlue isn't squirted into the DPF, then if you ask me, the DPF is going to block up eventually, and then your vehicle is going to lose power or eventually break down. So I thought, no, as far as I know, if you do a DPF delete on your diesel vehicle, it's got to be done properly, because if it's not done properly, it's not going to work. So I'll go into this a little bit anyway, and then we'll come to what he's actually done anyway and what the conclusion was. So, hello, Vivian. Hope you're well. Nice to be chatting about cars. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for the T-shirt. You gave this to me before I left, so I haven't put it on yet until today. I'm flipping sweating in here. I just put the aircon on, so it's like blooming hell. I'll get into this in a minute. Hello, Mark. DPFs on Mark 5 Mondeo. Mine was full trying to regen all the time, putting diesel in the oil. Service light on after 1,500 miles. Took it off. Got it professionally cleaned. 50,000 miles later, still good. Yeah, there's different types of DPF systems, obviously. They're not all the same. You've got, if you went back to, I don't know, maybe the 1990s, diesels were just normally aspirated engines, okay? Or maybe you had a turbo diesel. There wasn't no DPFs over in England. So all this emission stuff hadn't really come in. I think it was around about 2009 that they actually started making it law that diesels had to have, all new diesels, they had to have a DPF fitted to meet the new like Euro 5 emission standards. Obviously, once DPFs are introduced to bring the emissions down, it's caused a load of problems for a lot of people and a lot of expense. obviously we all know that it's to bring the emissions down and make the environment cleaner. I don't know if you remember years ago, you'd see all the buildings, the walls would get black from the soot coming out from diesels, and also that the soot that comes out of diesels and all this particulate matter, it's not good for your health if you breathe it in. It can seriously give you health problems. That's for sure. And as we know, many old diesels, when the cars are new and everything is working properly and all in limits as it should be, even a diesel car without a DPF on it can be pretty clean running. But as time goes by, they get more mileage on them. The tolerances get more out and out, and eventually you get like smoky diesels, and a lot of diesels don't get maintained as they should be, and you end up with them running poorly in a lot of cases and kicking out loads of black smoke. So I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's a good thing in a way to stop keep the emissions down and keep the black smoke out, especially if you, like in London before. I mean, I don't agree with this ULEZ crap, but I mean, they used to call London going down to the smog or the fog, you know, because there were so many cars down there that used to get like a smog over London with all the traffic congestion and all the exhaust fumes. And, you know, making diesels cleaner, it really needed to be done at the end of the day. So if I just explain a little bit about like DPFs, and then we'll go on to what my mate's done about his car, and then we'll go from there. But there's a few different types of DPFs. You had your very early DPFs, which were nothing more than like a filter. Most DPFs, modern ones these days, they're like a ceramic honeycomb filter inside a metal casing, which is the exhaust casing. They basically trap particulate matter, which is to us is soot, really. They trap the soot in this honeycomb, and then it gets burnt in that, you know, burnt inside that honeycomb rather than going out to the atmosphere. But the honeycomb is designed to allow the actual exhaust gases to flow through the honeycomb and go out at the exhaust while trapping the soot at the same time, and then it burns the soot off. The very early ones, you'd probably have sample probe pipes coming off the DPF to know how much soot loading there was, or when to bring the engine management light on. Because if the DPFs get loaded up with too much soot, they'll bring an engine management light on. And these early DPFs, a lot of them relied on the fact that you had to drive maybe at a certain speed for a certain distance down the motorway to actually burn the soot loading off. They were a pretty crude system and weren't very reliable, especially if you do a lot of short start-stop journeys around town and your engine or exhaust was never getting up to the right temperature. The actual DPFs could block up quite quickly. Then you'd have to go down the route of getting them cleaned or getting chemicals put in them and all that sort of thing. Nothing but a pain. Then they brought out more sophisticated systems. You had the DPFs where you had the PATS fluid, which is like a tank. It's a bit like AdBlue. I'll sort of like lump AdBlue and PATS fluid in the same category, really, because these are like tanks which sit underneath your car near your fuel tank. And either the PATS fluid, which is something you would fill the tank up with. The same with AdBlue. You put AdBlue in your tank, like a separate tank to your fuel tank, and that fluid gets squirted into the DPF and obviously burns off the soot. But the difference being, it's for the majority of the time it's controlled by the engine ECU, which brings on regenerations to actually clear the soot. And then you've got I'd say the more modern ones is like what was used on the Mark V Mondeos, which is where the engine ECU uses the fuel injectors to actually change the fueling and fire at different intervals and stuff like that to bring on about a forced not a forced regen. I think they call it an active regen. passive regenerations on your DPF filter is usually when you're driving along and it happens naturally. The exhaust gets to a certain temperature and it starts burning the soot off. I think the active regenerations is when the ECU actually initiates a regen. Like if you're driving around town and the soot load in your DPF gets to a certain level, then basically the ECU kicks in and starts a regen. And with the case of the Mark V Mondeos, the way it's doing it, using the diesel injectors to inject extra fuel at different intervals and all that, if there is a problem in the system at all, it can cause oil dilution where the excess fuel the injectors are injecting and what stroke of the piston going up and down, where the fuel is injected into the cylinders, the fuel isn't burnt off properly, and then it ends up going into the crankcase, into the sump, and it starts making your oil level rise. And we had a lot of problems with oil levels rising on the Mark V Mondeos. If you go back to a Mark IV Mondeo, they had a nozzle in the exhaust downpipe where it would fire diesel fuel, this nozzle. The ECU would cause this nozzle to fire diesel fuel into the DPF. So on a Mark IV Mondeo, you won't get oil dilution or the oil level rising. It won't happen on them cars. It only happens on the cars where the actual injectors are used to create the actual regeneration. Anyway, so my mate, he had been to this Citroen dealer and they said to him, it needs a new AdBlue tank, what's your options? He's been told about having the software removed. And I thought to myself, you can't just remove the software from your AdBlue tank because the DPF is then going to block up. So I ran through to him basically what you would probably have to do if you were going to do a DPF delete. But the big problem I tried to emphasize, and he's taken this, he's not going to get this DPF delete done anyway, but he just wanted to know, because somebody mentioned it to it. And when somebody mentions something to you, you kind of think, well, let me investigate, let me hear all about it so I know what's what, and I know what my options are. And I said, yes, you can get a DPF delete done on your car. And I'll go through that in a minute. But in a country like the UK, and I should think in most countries anyway, especially Europe and America, it is illegal to tamper with a DPF system. And it's, if you were to remove your DPF and just, I know on some cars you can say you can remove your DPF and you can put a separate exhaust pipe in its place. Then you can sort out the software, remove the software as well, and make your DPF car back into like a standard diesel without a DPF. Which I guess in a lot of ways you could say, well, yeah, now the DPF's out of the way, I'm going to get a lot less hassle, and you probably will do. You'll get a lot less problems. There's a lot less to go wrong now the DPF and all its software is out of the way. But you have to remember that if you take your car for an MOT test and the tester says, well, this car should have a DPF on it, even if it was to still pass the smoke test, which in a lot of cases it probably would, it's still illegal to remove the DPF. And you could have your car fail its MOT test because of that if a tester sees that there's no DPF on this car. Or if you were to cut out the DPF from its casing and there was signs that it had been tampered with, it could still fail the MOT test. And not only that, if you were to get pulled up by VOSA or anything like that, and they saw that it had been tampered with, you could get a hefty fine. Also, if you wanted to sell the car to somebody else after you finished with it, what are you going to say to them? By the way, this car should have a DPF on it, but it hasn't. So up to you, mate. If you want to, they might not want to buy it because of that, because it's actually a legal car to use on the public roads in England without a DPF. So there's a lot of implications to doing something like that. People do it, and some people would say, well, I'm going to keep this car, I'm using it for this purpose, and I'm going to use it until it goes to the scrapyard. So I'm going to take that chance. And I mean, that's up to them. But if you're one of them people that don't really know which way to go, then it's probably not the best way to go. However, the problem a lot of people are faced with is, in a lot of cases, the actual cost of putting a DPF system right. Say, for instance, you've got, we'll just take a Mark 5 Mondeo, for instance. Say the DPF filter itself needed replacement, and that was a fact. It just had to be replaced. And you could be talking in excess of £3,000. And a brand new DPF is a lot of money. I believe in a lot of these modern cars, they don't actually do aftermarket DPFs at the minute, which are substandard anyway. If you had to buy a brand new genuine DPF and have it fitted, you're going to have a whopping great bill. And in some cases, the repair bill would outweigh the value of the car. So that's the problem. There you go. So you can see why people do some of these things. And when it comes to a DPF delete, it's going to be a fraction of the cost. It's still not going to be exactly cheap, but you can understand why people do it. But in any case, if you've got a diesel and you've got a DPF fault in your car, the first thing you have to do is get some diagnostics done on it. You need to find a decent diesel mechanic. And I know in some cases that could be difficult because a lot of mechanics don't like to deal with diesels. They don't know what they're really doing with them. And well, that's just the way it is sometimes, and you can get the wrong information. They could say, well, you need this change, and it could be totally wrong. So sometimes you have to actually go to the main dealer, and even that could be problematic. They can still give you the wrong information. But assuming you can find somebody that can tell you exactly what is wrong with your car, then you can go forward, and it might be something simple. I've had DPFs that have blocked up and needed a forced regen and all that for the simple fact that one vacuum pipe had come off or was split, something stupid like that. So there's a whole load of sensors and pipes and God knows what on a lot of cars that all have to be working properly, and if they're not working properly, one little thing can cause your DPF to block up. So if your car is checked out and diagnosed properly, you may well find it is something pretty simple to start with. If your car's getting on a few years and it's done a lot of mileage, and it does get down to the point where you could say, or you've been told the DPF actually does need changing, then that's when you've got to start thinking about spending some serious money. The problem is when do you say, well, a DPF definitely needs changing? Because how do you know a DPF needs changing when you hear so many stories out there that you can get these chemicals? You could probably take the DPF off and you can put chemicals in it and you can blast it through and clean it all out. Yeah, some DPFs do need a good clean, and a cleaning cycle done professionally can sort them out. I have found in some cases though, once again referring to the Mark 5 Mondeos, you get a DPF that's done a lot of mileage. It's not always a case of them being sooted up. Sometimes it's a case of the actual honeycomb inside is melted. It's melted so that all the little honeycomb holes, a lot of them, have melted and sealed over, in which case there's too much pressure in the DPF and the ECU sees it as soot loading even if it isn't, and they become seriously blocked after that. And some of these DPFs, I've seen their actual outer metal casing become bulged where they've got so much pressure in them, and in some cases they can actually crack. So in that case, the DPF has to be replaced. But once again, it needs somebody to actually see that situation and know what they're looking for. So someone who's dealt with DPFs and diesels will, for a long period of time and seen all these things, they will be able to tell you that. Let me just go through a few comments just to get a few people out, and then I'll carry on a little bit. Mark, Now on 444,000 mile and still original. I said, what? They're still on using a DPF. If you, they say, if you were to read up how long does a DPF last, they'd probably say something like 100,000 miles. In my opinion, I've seen DPFs last well in excess of 300,000 miles in a lot of cases. If your engine is maintained properly and you're driving correctly, like i.e. not doing a lot of short stop-start journeys and not allowing your engine and DPF system to get up to full temperature, if you're doing some good journeys on that, your DPF can last a lot longer than 100,000 miles for sure. In fact, in a lot of cases, it'll probably last you until you get rid of the car, provided nothing goes wrong with it. John, well, has another fault with the DPF system caused the fault? What are the DPF differential pressures? Generally, other problems cause DPF problems. If it has to be replaced, I would only use genuine. I think in a lot of cases, you'd have to buy a genuine DPF. Because when we were looking for the DPFs for the Mark V Mondeos, you couldn't get an aftermarket one. You had to buy a brand new one. And if you want to buy a second-hand one, that's pretty much impossible to find in a lot of cases. So, yeah, it's an expensive old game. Glenn, stick to petrol. Well, that's the way it's going now, isn't it? I mean, if you want to blame somebody, blame Gordon bloody Brown. He came in through the back door and went out through the back door, didn't he? And he was the one who told you in the late 1990s that diesels are more tax. You know, you can get lower tax than diesels. They're the way of the future. They're the cars to buy. And of course, now they've done a U-turn, haven't they? Now they're demonising diesels. Ironically, at a time when diesels are more clean than they've ever been. I mean, you look at the tailpipe, a lot of these modern diesels, you could lick your tongue on them, they're so squeaky clean, the emissions are that good. It's unbelievable how the technology has advanced to make the emission systems so clean, and they work so well, when they're working, that is. When they're not working, it's bloody terrible, but when they are working properly, the diesel engines are ever so clean now. Look at BMWs and all that. Just look at the tailpipe. They used to be sooty. Not anymore. Hello, Dwayne. Good evening. Hope you and the Kent family. Yes, we're fine. Hope you're doing well too. It's still a bit early here, so I haven't even woke up properly. Clayton, I just had a new one fitted to my Ford Custom Tornado, blow turbo, put oil into exhaust and made DPF go wrong, but it's on 220,000. First thing major, yeah. Well, it ain't done too bad at 220,000. I mean, that's a lot of mileage. I mean, flipping heck. If that was just, I mean, a lot of people would never get to that kind of mileage, would they? They're getting a lot of vehicles these days. Depends what you use them for. Vivian, my mate's Peugeot just had AdBlue issues, leaking tank and seized injector and DPF blocked. Cost him 3K. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had it so many times in the past. You can have, say for instance, you have a diesel fuel injector go faulty. The engine starts misfiring. You get loads of unburnt fuel going to the DPF. The driver carries on driving it because, you know, a lot of the drivers, some of the taxi drivers, didn't even realise, even if the car's running bad, they're still driving it around. And then obviously the car goes into reduced power mode because the DPF gets blocked up. So then you've got to sort out what the problem was to start with. You've got to fix the injector and anything else that's caused the DPF to block up. Then you've got to do like a forced regeneration of the DPF to clear it out. And I think DPFs, they're the soot loading on these things, they don't go up to like 100%. I think they go up to like 0 to 250%. I know on the Mark V Mondeos, if the soot loading was to get over 100%, it would bring the engine management light on. If it went up to 150%, it would put it into limp mode, forced power, low power mode. I've never seen one go up to 250%. I've seen one close to 200% though. Then you have to do a forced regen. And you can actually, if you've got the diagnostic tool, you can watch the soot loading go down on the computer as it's doing the regen. And you get a funny old smell coming out of the tailpipe. And if you listen carefully, quite often you'll hear the engine note change where the ECU is controlling the fueling to actually carry out the regen. So doing a forced regen or any kind of regen, I mean, it will work as long as everything else on the system is working properly as well. Like I said earlier, if there could be a vacuum pipe split or something like that, which is all to do with the system. If it's not right or still broken, then the forced regen might fail, or it might just pass. And then as soon as you drive the car back up the road, the engine light comes back on and it goes back into limp mode, because the initial problem, what caused the DPF to get blocked in the first place, is still there. And so you're back to square one again. So you've got to carry on trying to find out the root cause of the problem in the beginning. And it only has 44,000 miles on it. Oh yeah, you do get some cars that do very low mileage, and they have all sorts of problems. I'd call them Jonahs. Fling them overboard. John, from lovely Coventry. Hello. Hope you're still having a blast out there with Ken. Love the channel and your videos. Well, thank you, John. It's very nice of you. Yeah. I'm just getting ready for the day. The sun is just starting to come up now. It's I had to get up early for this. So the trouble is, because you're in the UK, I presume you're in the UK. We're 7 hours ahead, and so I've got to get up really early. Otherwise, it's going to be too late for you over there, because I know it's Sunday night over there, and you've probably got work in the morning. A lot of you got to get up for work the next day, and I don't want to sort of like start. If I got up at like 6, 7 in the morning, it'll be like midnight for you. So I thought I'd make an early start. At least it keeps it to like a respectable time. Like 10 o'clock is getting on, but fellow tractor, shouldn't that have been covered under warranty? No, it's a vehicle that's out of warranty. So if it was under warranty, then that'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? But just take it to the dealer and say fix it. It's under warranty, but it's not under warranty. So that's the problem. When it's not under warranty, and you've got to pay for these things out of your own personal pocket, and it's a huge bill, especially for something that in some cases you think shouldn't really be happening. In the case of this vehicle, it's an AdBlue tank, which, as he found out, was a problem on these vehicles anyway, a common problem, and he's got to pay out a hell of a lot of money to fix something that shouldn't have really gone wrong in the first place. I mean, you would have thought that if it was a problem, they would have done a recall on it, but there hasn't been a recall done on these AdBlue tanks. So they'll just keep making money out of selling new ones. And in another, God knows how many miles, it'll probably break again. Joanne, hello. Hello in there, South Africa. Flipping heck. How you doing? William, hello to you. Bartos, hope all is well and you're settling in nicely and getting used to the heat. Oh, flipping heck. The heat, well, it's May over here. It's like the height of summer. It's hot. It's 5 in the morning, and I've just had to put the aircon on because it's like it really is flipping muggy, especially when you've got the heat's okay when you've got a breeze, but lately there's been like no breeze, no wind, no nothing, and it's just the heat is like full on, I mean, you don't want to go out in the sun. If you go out, I've got to put a t-shirt over my head and walk around like that or something. Or even with an umbrella up, you can feel the heat beaming through the bloody umbrella on your head still. It's like a flipping, you've got to experience it. I suppose a lot of people who live in these countries, they know what I'm talking about. But in England, it's you'd be glad to get back to England just to get some cool air. Hello. Good morning, sitting here on a terrace in Sigabet, drinking coffee and waiting for the daylight. Well, that's a nice Monday morning for you, isn't it? Johan, enjoying your videos. What do you use for video editing? I use Final Cut Pro X. I have used iMovie because I've got an Apple computer. I mean, I have used iMovie, but I think that the Final Cut Pro X is you can obviously do a lot more with it. Not that I do much of my videos anymore. I don't really do anything interesting. I just put one clip after the other. But I've been using it for so long now. It's like I just find it so easy to use. So that's what I use anyway. William, missing your car wisdom. Spent the weekend doing power steering hoses on a 1.6 petrol Focus. I bet that's not the job you... No, the flipping power... Oh, God. I'll tell you, some of them jobs, they're all right, but I mean, it's like some of these hoses are rooted in right horrible directions and trying to get the hoses out, and then you get flipping oil pissing all over the place, and then if something doesn't seal properly, it leaks again, and yes, certainly been there. Looks like you can't get rid of your bad habit of helping people. Well, when he mentioned it to me, I thought, oh, that's quite an interesting subject, actually. So I know a lot of people have diesels, and I've been messing around with diesels for a long time. So it's something a lot of people don't really talk about, because when you talk about a DPF delete, it's like, oh my God, that's illegal. What isn't illegal in the UK? But I mean, it's not the fact that it's illegal. It's that you have to shut up about it. Even the fact that it's illegal, you still want to have the conversation to talk about it. So at least you can be educated on what you should do. I mean, I'm not saying you should do it. In most cases, you shouldn't do it. You should probably find out if you can get your car sorted out without having to do something like that. But some people will resort to doing that simply because they haven't got the money or not prepared to spend the money to fix these cars. You've got to remember, sometimes these repair bills can run into thousands of pounds, which is worth more than the car. What do? Do you scrap your car, or do you sort of like get matey down the road to delete the DPF for you, just so it can keep you going? You know, you sometimes got moral problems and issues that you've got to sort it out one way or another. So not everybody's got the money to go out and just ditch their car because they can't afford the repair bill or fitting a new DPF and then buying another car. So, you know, it's just the way the world is. It's the same, you know. Matey, little Bobby wants a bottle of gin. He's underage. He can't go into the shop and buy his bloody bottle of gin because he's not old enough. So he gets his older mate to go and buy him a bottle of drink. Then he goes into the play park and drinks it with his mates. You know, we all know it goes on. You get kids that are underage drinking alcohol. It's illegal, but they still bloody do it. So, mind you, I don't see that over here. I don't see kids drinking alcohol. In fact, I don't see groups of kids doing anything that they were done in the UK, like hanging around the local convenience store. I see lots of groups of kids over here. They get a big wog box music system and they take it out to somewhere and they'll do a dance routine. That seems to be a big thing over here, doing like multiple people doing a dance routine. And that's what the kids seem to be doing. It's quite bizarre. Anyway, I'm getting off subject. Derek, all 2 litre HDI engines the same? Will a Mark V Mondeo engine fit a Peugeot Boxer? They're not all the same. There's different variations. It's something you'd probably have to look into, depending on the year. Quite often, and a lot of the years, as I found with the Mark V Mondeo, there is a whole list of engine codes that engines all look the same, but there are a list of engine codes, and it's quite confusing to try and work out what all these engine codes are supposed to mean, because the information isn't readily available, sort of thing, to understand what the difference is. Well, I think, as I found in a lot of cases, it depending what power ratios or that these engines, what vehicles they're going to go into, and in all honesty, it's probably best to try and find whatever vehicle you've got, is to look up what particular engine and what code it is for your vehicle. Even if it's in a different vehicle, it may well be compatible and fit in your vehicle, because quite often a number of these engines, they are the same. There are different variations, but sometimes these different variations will interchange. I have fitted in the Mark V Mondeos engines with different codes, and they are fitted perfectly well. And I found that the actual physical engine itself is the same. However, there's sometimes a few slight differences on the inlet manifold or something like that, depending what car it's fitted in, what vehicle it's fitted in. So it's a tricky one, but I would probably say just try and find the right engine. Even if it's out of a different vehicle, if it's got the same engine code, then there's a high chance it will fit. Because I know on the Mark V Mondeo that the engine in that, the 2 litre diesel, they're all pretty much the same, even if they've got different codes to them. Anyway, I won't go on too much about this, because it's a bit of a complicated issue, and you have to know really what the codes mean. Barry, I'm sure you can eat them. What do you mean, that the beetle? I don't think I want to try. That just flew in here like a kamikaze. Trouble is, I don't want it flying around because it will probably hit me in the bloody head while I'm talking. Mike, the answer is, as we know in the trade, find the fault, fix it. Usually a sensor or block pipe. People are not educated how they work and just listen to their mate in the pub how to fix it. Yeah, well, everybody knows an answer to something, don't they? That's the problem. Oh, I've got a mate who does that. Yeah. You take it down there, and then sort of like 3 weeks later, they're still no farther forward. You've got to know, or take it to somebody who knows what they're doing, especially with a diesel. I mean, you take diesels of old, the early diesels back in the day. Probably the most complicated part of a diesel engine was the rotary diesel pump. I mean, that really was a sophisticated piece of engineering and high precision. And if you had to fit one of them rotary diesel pumps, they needed to be set up properly as well. We usually have a DTI in the back of the pump, and it was quite a procedure to set these pumps up. And the diesel mechanics of old, who used to deal with these rotary pumps and set diesels up, they were quite skilled. It really was a skilled job. However, today that's all gone out the window, because the rotary diesel pump is obsolete, and it's now high pressure fuel pumps. It's a lot easier to fit one of these high pressure fuel pumps. But in saying that, the electrical side of diesels now is extremely complicated. Bloody hell, I remember on the old Ford Sierras, they used to have a Peugeot diesel engine in them, and there was one wire to stop the engine. There was a solenoid on the rotary diesel pump, little solenoid controlled by one wire, and that was it. Now you've got it's just a electronic fuel injection system, same as you'd find on a petrol car. Everything is controlled by the engine ECU. so that they become a lot more complicated electrically. But still saying that, whatever car you've got, it takes time to try and work out a lot of these problems when things go wrong. It's just not, you can't just, in a lot of cases, plug a diagnostic tool in and say, oh, well, it's coming up with this code, that relates to that, and just change that component and think that's going to fix it, because in a lot of cases it won't. In a lot of cases it's something else. So finding a decent mechanic that knows what he's doing with diesels is always a bonus, rather than someone who might half know something about something and then just piss you about in the long run. Vincent, big that. James, that's maybe American cockroach. No, it's a bloody beetle. We had one come in the other night. It just went like flying underneath the settee, and the next thing in the morning, it was dead up. It was dead upside down on its blooming shell. Well, I thought it was dead. It was laying there for flipping hours. Then it's all of a sudden its legs started moving again. But I'll tell you, so there's some load of trees behind me in this field, and there's some noises coming from insects which are incredibly loud. And I don't know what's making these noises. I'm going to investigate one of these days. Lovely beetle. As long as it's not I don't like cockroaches. As long as it's not a cockroach. Johan, can you buy a Honda XR150cc over there? It should be excellent with the road over there. We get them here in South Africa. You probably can. I'd have to have a look at that one. I know you can get a lot of bikes over here that you won't be able to get in England, or won't be able to get easily, that's for sure. I'll have a look at that one. I'll keep that message and see if I can source one, because there's so many bike shops here. Everywhere you go, there's motorbike shops, and they're selling all kinds. Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, Kawasaki. There's so many. Oh, it's unbelievable choice, and they're cheap as well. The bikes over here, they're a lot cheaper than what they are in UK. Millie, hello. Hope you're okay. Just wondering, have you made Ken one of the banana leaves that did a video on years ago? No. Banana loaves. No, we haven't. I used to actually like making them. I haven't done one, no. I'll probably get around to it eventually. Diggler, I need a new DPF for my Mark IV Mondeo. They cost about £130, £150 on eBay, but are they any good? I've never been keen on aftermarket stuff like that. It's it doesn't sound a lot of money for a Mark IV Mondeo, and I mean, if the Mark IVs, they're just like a straight pipe, really, aren't they? So you could take a chance. I don't know if there's anywhere you can read any reviews about them. I'm not sure, but I really think that the aftermarket DPFs and stuff like that, if you can get them, they're probably not the best of qualities. So, but there again, when you compare it to the price of a brand new one, it's like you can see why people go for the aftermarket ones. Let me talk about this DPF delete so I can get it out of the way, just so in case some of you don't know what can be done, then I'll quickly explain it. Obviously, on a diesel car, let's say for instance your DPF is blocked and it can't be cleaned and it can't be force regened, so you can't bring the soot loading down enough to remove the engine management light, and it's been decided that the DPF needs to be replaced. You're looking at a huge bill, so you decide to go down the route of having a DPF delete done. what does that exactly involve? Number one, you have to remove the DPF, and in some cases you can take the DPF off your car and you can buy a pipe that would fit in the place of the DPF to simply just replace it. In other cases, you would have to take the DPF off your car, you would have to cut it open and literally remove the filter from inside the DPF casing, and then weld the casing back together and fit it back onto your car. Once again, you have to bear in mind that it's illegal to tamper with a DPF. So if you were to do something like that, you would have to make sure that there's no visible trace that anybody could see that it's been tampered with in the first place. But if you went and done that, then you would have to get the software, or they would call it remapping the ECU. So you would have to have the software removed for the DPF so that the engine ECU can't see basically the DPF and the sensors that control it. That way you've made your car back to a standard turbo diesel without the DPF system on it. And if everything was done properly, then your car should run as normal again. You may well find that I don't really think you're going to get much of a increase in power. There's conflicting stories. Some would say you get less power, others would say you get more power, but you have to remember, with the DPF in the way, it's a restriction on the exhaust gases anyway, so I'd probably say you'd get a bit more power. However, you will get some black soot coming out your exhaust now, because the DPF is been removed. There's nothing to capture the soot, so it's going to go all the way through the exhaust and out the tailpipe. So your tailpipe will now become black and sooty. Providing your car is running in tip-top condition, even without a DPF, it should still be fairly clean, but you will be getting some visible smoke, probably on start-up, and at certain points when you're driving, you will see some smoke coming out the tailpipe. But on these modern diesels, once again, if it's running properly, then it should be pretty much minimal, and you should be able to drive that car perfectly fine. You'll probably find you've got less trouble with it, because once you've removed a lot of the trouble with the cars these days is because they're fitted with so many emission related systems. They're all perfectly fine when they're working, but when they stop working, then it causes all kinds of issues. Whereas when you went back to the early diesels, there was little to next to nothing on them, so there was less to go wrong. And that is the problem these days. The cars are becoming so incredibly complicated. So that is it. As going back to the beginning, you can't just remove or remap the ECU depending what's wrong with your DPF. You've got to, because if like in the case of this AdBlue tank, if you just remove the software, then no more AdBlue is going to get squirted into the exhaust to clear the soot, to burn off the soot in the DPF. So the DPF will eventually get blocked up, and once it gets blocked up, your car's going to start losing power. So if you're going to have the job done properly and have the DPF deleted properly, you've got to do it properly. And in some cases, the DPFs on some of these cars, they're fitted in very awkward positions. They're not just a case of quickly unbolting it. Sometimes taking a DPF off a car is quite a major job. It includes removing the subframe and all sorts to get it off. So it could end up quite expensive just doing a DPF delete. But you know, that's basically it. It's not something I'd advise you to get done, but in some cases it's a last resort, and people would do it because they ain't got much of an option. I'm not 100% sure here, and I don't know how they got away with it. Well, I'm sure it was a Mazda 5, not that newer one. It's going back a few years now. I'm pretty sure it is a Mazda 5 diesel. Don't quote me on it, it might be something else, but they were designed specifically for oil dilution. So you've got the dipstick on the car. If you gave it an engine oil and filter change, you would set the oil level on the maximum on the dipstick. But there's another notch quite a bit higher up on the dipstick. And as you drove that car, probably after about 6,000 miles, you would check your oil level. And if the oil level had risen to this other notch on your dipstick, you would have to then replace the oil and filter again. Because these cars were designed for, that's how because these cars were using the actual injectors to carry out the forced, well, not the forced, the active regens while the car was being driven. But they hadn't got it right because the oil level was rising and they knew about it. So they just come up with basically, oh, well, after 6,000 miles or so, you have to replace your engine oil. I'm sure some of you out there will probably know this. I just can't remember exactly what car it was, but I'm sure it was a Mazda 5. And how the manufacturers got away with releasing these cars, knowing that the oil level was going to rise anyway, and it was down to the owner of the car to keep an eye on the oil level. And they got away with it because the cars were sold, and it's just flipping crazy to think that you can buy a brand new car and be told you've got to keep an eye on your oil level and make sure it doesn't go over this notch on your dipstick. Otherwise, you could cause serious engine damage. And it's called oil dilution, where the oil level rises. And if you don't keep an eye on it and it goes higher than it should be, if your oil level rises to such a high level, it can cause serious engine damage. And on a diesel, if you get diesel fuel or even engine oil, take for instance, here's a classic one on a diesel. If you get the engine oil, or say the turbo breaks up and the oil in the turbo goes back into the engine through the inlet manifold, diesels, because they run on diesel oil, which, I mean, diesel fuel is basically oil, they can run on their own engine oil. And so a diesel will literally take off by itself if it runs on its own oil. And if you've got like the engine oil massively over the maximum, that can happen as well. And also you can end up with a bent conrod and all kinds of engine damage. So it's diesels are funny old cars, you know. They really do have to be maintained as best you can. I know in a lot of cases these days, it's more a case of replace the engine oil and filter, fuel filter and air filter. There's not really much more you can do to them, apart from obviously keep an eye on how they're running. And the trouble with diesels is you've got the diesel injectors. As long as everything's working fine, then it's great. But the slightest thing with a diesel that's not functioning properly, it can cause all kinds of problems. One injector that's not firing the fuel into the cylinder properly, as it should be doing, can cause all kinds of engine knocking noises, and then you get kind of smoke and all sorts coming out of your exhaust. You get a misfire on a diesel, it needs to be sorted out pretty quick. It's the same with a petrol, really. In a petrol car, if you get an engine misfire on one of these modern petrols, you need it sorted out as quickly as possible, because all the unburnt fuel goes into the exhaust and into the catalytic converter. It can overheat the catalytic converter and melt it. Then you've got an extra expense of replacing that as well. So that's basically it. You can do a DPF delete. You can get out of Dodge. You can get around the situation that if the repair cost is that excessive that you're not prepared to pay for it, or you can't pay for it, then there is a way out of it. But once again, like in England, it is illegal. So you take your chances, basically. Let's see who we've got. Passed the emissions last month. you will find, I think I've already said this, you will find even if some cars that have had the DPFs deleted, they will still pass an emission test. I think what some people will probably do is they will, you know, like you used to put Red-X in the fuel tank. You can get diesel treatment you can put in with your fuel. And then you give your car a good blast down the motorway. Clear the injectors, make sure everything's running right, give it an oil and filter change. And because these cars, the more modern ones, they're pretty good anyway. Even without a DPF, they're still pretty clean, but obviously not as clean as what they would be. So a lot of them cases, they'll still get through an MOT test. Terry, hello. Hello from Ireland. Well, good evening to you, Terry. Eddie, my nephew could not now believe me. 2015 1.6 diesel Vauxhall Astra is clean air exempt without having AdBlue, but the best thing, I don't pay road tax. Oh yeah, well, that's nice, isn't it? If you don't pay road tax. Yeah, because they tax all vehicles, didn't they, depending on how much CO2 they put out. Flipping nightmare. Little Otters, hello. I cleared my P2463 code on my Mark IV 2-litre diesel as it's running fine. Took it for a long 360-mile round trip. Engine management light came on about 20 miles from home. That sounds about right. Just when you thought you were home and dry. When I got home, 4Scan said regeneration 6 kilometres. That seems a bit funny. You shouldn't bring an engine management light on to say it needs regeneration. It should just do it. Something not quite right there. I don't think AdBlue has anything to do with DPF blocking. It reacts with gases recycling nitrogen oxides, but in French engines they use Eloy's fluid additive that reduces combustion temperature of soot. Yeah, I wouldn't like to say, to be honest with you. As far as I can see, these systems have to work, and they all work to clean the DPF. I mean, it could well be the case that you could say, in the case of an AdBlue system, you could disable the AdBlue, and it's debatable whether the actual DPF would block up or not. But without the AdBlue going into the system and doing its job, I wouldn't like to say for sure. I know on most diesels, if like the PATS fluid or in like the case of the Mark V Mondeos or the Mark IV Mondeos, if a diesel isn't squirted into the DPF, it will block up eventually. So it's a tricky one. You'd really have to know for certain what would be the implications of it not working. But I wouldn't like to take the chance and just disable an AdBlue system and then think it might be okay, because I don't know what would happen after that. After you drove it down the road for so long, there might be other implications happen later on. David to Mark Wilson, who did that on Mark V? Is my 2-litre TDI 210 horsepower bi-turbo a Ford or Pug engine? Is my 2-litre TDI? I should think it's probably I would say, without knowing exactly what car it is, it's probably a Peugeot engine. Ford uses Peugeot engines in nearly all their diesel engines now. I think the fact for that is Peugeot can produce a cheaper engine, so they They just buy the Peugeot engines and put them in. You may be able to run on old cooking oil. I'm not sure that'd work on some of these modern ones. It might work on an old, really old diesel. Okay, Alan, does my Mondeo Mark IV have EGR problems? It will smoke heavily for a short while every so often, not all the time, so it's not an engine issue, no codes or engine. Well, EGR valves are funny old things. They can, in some cases, stop the engine from even starting. They can, if the valve is open when it shouldn't be, they can cause a lot of smoke. So it's quite a possibility. If it's only occasionally, could well be. And EGR valves are for the best part, they're temperamental. I've had a lot of EGR valves that will cause engines to smoke intermittently. I know on the old Transits, they used to actually stop the vehicle. They used to have a physical valve in them, like a valve you'd find in a cylinder head, and it would get stuck in the open position, and the van wouldn't even start then. Or if it did start, there'd be plumes and plumes of smoke coming out. And then if the valve come unstuck and shut itself again as it's supposed to, the van would run perfectly fine with no smoke. But yeah, EGR can definitely make your car smoke. Depends on how bad the situation is. If an EGR valve gets stuck completely and that's the end of it, then you can fix it. But I have found quite often that they will stick and unstick and all sorts, and it's difficult to pinpoint what the problem is. But it might be worth taking it off. Or even a lot of cases on a lot of cars, you can actually blank an EGR. If it's got a pipe coming off it or something, you can blank it off to actually stop the exhaust gases from going back through the engine. So if you blank the EGR valve off, then at least you can eliminate it. And if it cures it, then you can either leave it like that or just replace the EGR valve. Richie, I know this question is nothing to do with a DPF, but I have a 2015 Mark V Mondeo and noticed paint on rear wheel arch starting to bubble. Could it be rust? Yes, it can. Rust on a Mark V is pretty rare, I have to say, but I have seen it. Some of the Steve's taxis did get rust on them. Seems a bit strange. It might be a case of has it had a repair done there before or something like that. It's pretty bad if you have got rust on it, because all the taxis that we used to have, I mean, they never rusted, but a lot of the cars have been around pressure washers and been in so many flipping accidents and bumps and body filler put in them and all sorts like that, that on some of them they did start to get bits of rust here and there. So if it's a car that's been in an accident or something like that, would kind of explain it. But if your car's never been touched or anything like that and it's got rust bubbles on it, then or even if it's the paint that's got a pinhole in it or something and water has got underneath it and it's starting to make the paint bubble up, then yeah, well, it's a problem, isn't it? Although there are people out there that can fix that sort of thing, like isolated little touch-up jobs. So it probably isn't the end of the world, but them cars are certainly not prone to rust. Roman, hello. As I tried to burn out DPF driving Opel Severa with same engine that Ford Mondeo Mark V has with 150 kilometers, it started by parking to regenerate. If you drive one of them cars with that type of engine in it, when they start regenerating, a lot of people, if you don't know, you probably wouldn't notice it, but you probably get a funny smell coming from it. There's a real particular smell that comes out the exhaust when they start doing the regen. And a lot of these cars, if they're not doing like long journeys, If you're just around town quite a bit, and it will have to start trying to do regens around town, you can actually smell it. And even if you're parked on the side of the road, it could still try doing a regen at that time. And you'll know it's doing a regen simply by the smell. It's really like a potent, flipping, horrible like smell. But it's a sign that you need to sort of like get out and get a long run, because even these modern diesels with all the systems that are on them, I mean they're pretty good these days. But even so, if you're still doing like short around town journeys, they're not going to be able to regen properly. And no matter what system they got on them, it's not going to work. You really do need to get some longer journeys going out on the main road or down the motorway or something like that, so they can do a proper regen. Because a lot of cases, you'll probably find that the car will try and do a regen around town, and then you'll stop, and it'll be halfway through its regen. It won't have done it properly, and you can find a case where it's starting to do a lot of regens because it's not getting the proper regen done, and then that's when the oil dilution comes into it, because it's trying to do the regens too often. So just remember that on diesels, these modern diesels, short journeys are bad. You do need to have like a good long run. James, Jamo, hello. Greetings from Finland, hello. 1st of June, we get law. If you touch emission system, EGR, AdBlue, CAT, DPF, etc., you could find. Yeah. Yes. It's the same. It's the same in UK. I don't know if they would, but they could do. They could fine you heavily if you mess with these DPF systems or anything like that. I don't know about in England about an EGR valve. I don't think they'll be too bothered about that. But certainly on a DPF system, I know it's part of an MOT test that you mustn't even tamper with it. And if there's any signs on a DPF that's been tampered with in any way, then the MOT test has got the right to fail it. So you've just got to bear that in mind, haven't you? It's always best to actually try and fix the problem first. But like I say, if it gets to the point where it's going to be that expensive that you may as well scrap the car, then it puts you in that kind of situation. What do you do? Which way do you go? So and then it's down to you, really. It looks like most new cars are going hybrid now. Yeah, I don't actually mind the hybrids because it's still got the engine in it. I don't like the full electric vehicles, but I mean, I think hybrids would probably be the better idea. Do one. Hello. I was behind a 2019 Transit Custom the other day. The amount of black soot coming out from under the van, it had to have had the DPF and AdBlue system messed with. Quite possibly. Sometimes it's hard to tell. It could just be the case that it's been badly maintained, it's got problems. You've got to remember, even with the DPF system, if there are certain things wrong with a car, you can still get smoke out the back. However, a lot of vans that are running around, they do a lot of mileage, and in a lot of cases, the DPFs and the DPF system, they do go wrong. So it's an actual pain for the owners. So you could be well right there. It may well have been messed around with. But I would say in a lot of DPFs, if they're done properly, if they're deleted properly, you shouldn't be getting clouds of smoke coming out the back. Maybe by high revolution engine generate also more of those particles. If I drive 120, 130 kilometers, DPF regeneration does never occur. It might, well, it's hard to know really, isn't it? It might be regenerating without you even knowing, because they're designed to regenerate without you knowing. So I've only ever known, I mean, I drove like the Mark 5 Mondays around. If I was on a long journey, I wouldn't know if it's regenerating. The only time I ever knew a car was regenerating, which I'd come across numerous times, was when I was around town. I could smell it. And as soon as I smell it, I knew it was doing a regen. People don't use low SAPS oil, Alan. Well, that's actually a good point, because the engine oil that you use in whatever car you've got is very important, because a lot of the engine oils, these low SAPS oil, they're low ash oil, so to say. They'll create less ash. So it's like put simply, the engine oil you use in these modern diesels is quite critical to the performance and running of the engine optimally. If you use a shitty low grade engine oil, it's not going to be doing your engine any good, and especially on these emission systems, it's not going to help them. So it really is important to be using the proper grade engine oil that you're supposed to be using with whatever particular vehicle. It may sound a bit laughable to some people, but believe me, on these modern engines, it really is important. It wasn't in the past. In the past, the engines weren't made to such tight tolerances as they are made today, and there's been a lot of technology gone into engine oils, and so I would definitely say, if you've got a modern diesel engine or even petrol, for God's sake, at least use the proper grade engine oil. It is very, very important. M8 has a Peugeot with has a Peugeot with a removed DPF. Had constant issues with the car until he did the removal. Afterwards, it ran like a dream, and now has done 200k plus with no issues. Never had problems with MOT on top. Yeah, if it's done properly. I mean, I've seen cars that have been done, and they run fine. They run great. I've heard people say you get more power. They get better fuel consumption is one of the main things. However, I've heard other people say that their fuel consumption is around about the same, but it's each person with their own personal experience. So you've got to remember, if the DPF system is not there on your car, you're resorting your engine back to just a basic turbo diesel without all the emission related stuff on it. So with all that out the way, you've got less to go wrong. And then in a lot of cases that I've heard of DPFs being deleted, they will also delete the software for the EGR valve as well, because the EGR valve is something else that's very problematic. So if that's out the way, if the ECU can't see these sensors and everything to do with the emission related systems on your car, that's a heck of a lot less to go wrong. And yeah, that's the thing. If it is done properly as it should be done, then you've basically just got a standard diesel before DPS were introduced. Have you seen the videos from the Irishman on YouTube about DPF and how he fixes them? He's down in Bedfordshire. What do you? I haven't seen them. I haven't looked up no videos about DPFs or nothing like that. I'm just sort of like going by my own experience, what I've seen, so and basically what I know. So no, I'd have to literally look it up. Why can't the honeycomb DPF be fixed by cutting it up and drilled out the holes. Why can't the honeycomb DPF be fixed? Well, you can't fix it. You can't fix the honeycomb. What I was saying earlier is, if you do a DPF delete, you have to take, if you're going to use the original casing of the DPF, you have to either cut the casing open and remove the honeycomb, or you have to bash it out somehow and get rid of it. Because if you leave the honeycomb in place, and the soot will clog the honeycomb, and it'll eventually stop. The gases won't be able to get out the exhaust, and it will cause your car to conk out or lose a lot of power, or even cause engine damage if too much pressure gets built up. So if the honeycomb is damaged or anything like that, or is just melted, or God knows what, to the point it needs replacing, and you decide to do a DPF delete, you have to have that honeycomb removed. You've got to remember that the honeycomb is there to actually, if the DPF system is working properly, the honeycomb is there to trap the soot that comes out the engine and then burn it off in the honeycomb. But at the same time, it has to let the exhaust gases flow through the honeycomb and out to atmosphere. So the only time you'd actually get rid of the honeycomb is if you were going to get rid of the DPF system altogether. The newer Ford DPFs are so terrible with the particulate matter sensors. Well, the trouble is, it's like everything. They bring out DPFs. You go back to the early DPFs, they were pretty bloody basic things. They were no more than a DPF and maybe a couple of rubber sample probes going off to read the soot loading or the pressure in the DPF. But as the cars get newer and newer and newer, they keep adding more and more and more sensors. You know, it's like they just don't know when to stop. They just don't know when to call it a day. So it gets to the point where you've got that many sensors on these systems that it becomes an absolute nightmare if things go wrong. And the problem is, a lot of people, especially in vans, people that use their van for their living, they don't want their van in a garage constantly with all these issues. The more sensors there are, and they're all going to fail eventually, nothing's going to last forever. So it just becomes a nightmare for some people. You might get one that goes on for many miles without no problems, which is quite possible. But from what I've seen, especially in some of the more modern transits, bloody hell, they're riddled with problems. So once they get out of that warranty period, it's downhill. Hello, Mondo. How are you? How is your belly for spots? Okay. I still get bit here and there, but not as much as what I used to be. The mosquitoes aren't actually a problem anymore. It's sometimes I get bit by other things that I don't see, which are worse. But I'm actually not really that fussed about the mozzies anymore. Dwayne, make me working on Rover 216 convertible. Well, for old school, you cut your teeth on these. Rover 216, bloody hell. That's certainly going back a few years. I remember when Rover brought out the 200 series, they come out with a slogan, "This is the one." No, it's not. Oh my God. Eddie, Toyotas are investing in hydrogen technology. That's good. That's good. As long as it hasn't got a battery. A quick question, unrelated to DPF. Got a Mark V. I was all good until my dealer replaced the CV joint, while the actual fault was in the steering rack, which was replaced. Well, bloody hell! How the hell did I come to that conclusion? It was this. Well, don't even ask. These things happen. Ever since then, I've been having a lot of vibrations, especially at higher speeds. I feel them mostly in the steering wheel and driver's seat. Any clues? Clutch, flywheel and tyres, rims are all perfect. Well, if you've had vibrations ever since they replaced the drive shaft joint, I would pretty much say that's the problem. I know that on the Mark 5s, I never really had much of an issue with the outer drive shaft joints. It was always the inner ones, because they've got these 3 bearings on like a little tripod, and they've got little roller bearings, tiny little roller bearings in them. And if they get knocked out, they can cause all kinds of vibrations, really bad. Especially if you've like going up a hill, you're accelerating up a hill in 4th gear or something like that. Your steering wheel can start to shake, or the whole car can start to shake if one of them inner CV joints. I made a video on it where you can get hold of the drive shaft, and you can literally, if you move the wheel round to a certain position, you can move the drive shaft and in the joint like bump, 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 bump if they're worn out. Because just to say that somebody replaced the inner joint doesn't mean to say that it's been done properly. I know a lot of these joint kits that you get from Ford, that it's not, sometimes they don't just put a brand spanking new drive shaft on. And I know on the Mark 5s, the inner joint is separate to the outer joint, and you can get them independently and you have to build them up. They don't come as a whole shaft. You can buy the whole thing together, but it's hugely expensive. If you just buy the inner joint, it'll come as a kit form, and you've got to fit it. You've got to fit the bearings independently. And if one of them's not been fitted right, or some of the roller bearings are missing or something like that, if the guy fitting it's made a mess of it, then you're still going to have the vibration problems. I'd probably if it's been that joint's been fitted, I'd get that checked out again. Okay, had a career change, 35 years on spanners, swapped for a better life with a paintbrush. Next car will be a simple, reliable Suzuki Jimny. You know, out here, it's more a case of just keep driving it until the wheels fall off. Did you check the drive's half nut is tight after replacing CV? That's a good point. Yeah, just because somebody's fixed your car doesn't mean to say it's been done right. Dwayne, we got sunshine, no rain, no shower. Bloody hell. Can you ever remember? I mean, I know I haven't been there since January, but I know before January, up until Christmas and after to halfway through January, the weather was pretty shit. It is like rain, 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 nothing but bloody rain. And then I come over here and all I've heard is nothing but rain pretty much up until like a week ago, maybe. So I think it's been one of the worst years on record in England for shit weather, you know, gloomy, wet, damp. It's bloody terrible. Well, I hope you have a good summer over there anyway. You never know, you might have an Indian summer. It might go on all the way up until next Christmas. Fed up of cold, wet, working outdoors in the frost, and my aching bones and battered sausage fingers. Yeah, tell me about it. Although sometimes I kind of miss it, you know, like the frosty mornings, and you go out there. Maybe you get beautiful clear sky and sunshine, even though it's frosty. It's still nice, kind of nice, especially if the sun's hitting you. But I've had many a time where your fingers are gone completely numb. You even touch a brake disc or something like that, and you can't do it because it's so bloody cold. Yeah, no, I've been there many a time. bloody phone drive shaft. David, my last comment, I said it's the third Saturday in row watching you, but this week I'm pretty poorly, can't make it to the end. 10 hours later, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Don't they have DPF? DPF hospital. Citroen wanted 2K for our defect. Bloody hell. Sorted it. 2K. Just like that. There you go. No problem, Citroen. Yeah. Do you want a tip on top of that? Sorted it with a new box sensor for 90 quid. They wanted to fit a new AdBlue tank, etc. That may fix it. I always remember a certain problem we had on a Mark V. We took it to Ford because it was getting to the point I wasn't really sure what was wrong with it. This was the one with the ECU problem. And they said to me, the first thing they done at the Ford garage, they took the fuel filter top off and they looked at the fuel. And they go, the fuel's contaminated. That's it. We can't do nothing about this. The only way we can fix this, we'll have to replace the entire fuel system. New fuel rail, pipes, hoses, fuel tank, fuel rail, the lot. Hugely expensive. I said, I'd already had the fuel system apart. I'd looked in the tank and all that. And I said, there's nothing wrong with the fuel system. What you're seeing in the fuel filter area is just some little, it was like a few oil spots or something like that. But they made out it was metal. And I'm thinking to myself, metal doesn't float, you know. So I thought, just give us the goddamn car back. And in the end, it was the ECU that was the problem, because I thought there's no way that there's anything wrong with the fuel. I knew the fuel was fine. I'd already gone down that route. So, but when you get to a main dealer and they see the slightest thing wrong in the fuel system, it's like, oh, there's metal in the fuel. We'll have to change the whole fuel system. So then you're stuck. You either have to go ahead with their recommendation or go away, basically. And in our case, we went away. So, yeah. If I had said, yeah, carry on, just replace the whole fuel system, they would have replaced it all for thousands and thousands of pounds, and then they would have come back and said, yeah, well, it hasn't cured it. We'll have to look further into it. Yeah, bloody right, it wouldn't have cured it. It was the ECU that was the problem. Anyway, I could remember when most cars, the exhaust would rust away after 2 years. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bloody hell. Flipping heck. Bloody cars of old, the exhausts they would either block up, the baffles inside would break and block the exhaust up, or they would rust out. I've seen many exhausts with bloody great holes in them. Yeah, I remember the old Austin Ambassadors and Metros and stuff like that. Maestros, going back to British Leyland here. But you do find these days a lot of these, ever since 1995, since the first Mark I Mondeos came out, the exhausts seem to last forever. It's like unbelievable how they last now. Not on all cars, obviously, but on a lot of cars they do. Lost faith in dealer warranty repairs. Emery take and grease as they leave no spares. Yeah, now the world's moved on. It used to be sort of like, I remember when I used to work at Marshall's, there was a lot of emphasis put on actually getting the job done right. But I'm really not sure that's the case anymore. It's just a case of get it in, get it out. And if they can't fix the problem, just bullshit around it. Steelers were fitting motor factor filters and charging genuine parts prices. Caught them out. Bloody hell. I wouldn't have thought that of a main dealer, but who knows? we came back from holiday from Jamaica last Monday. I have just got used to time difference, but it's going to take me a bit to get there. Weight off 84 degrees in a day and 26. Bloody hell, yeah, that's for sure. In Russia, you can still buy a brand new car with a Euro 3 engine. That sounds great. I like it. I'll tell you something. I know if the way everything is gone in places like Europe and the UK and all these regulations, and it's like you're being crushed, isn't it? You just can't do anything anymore. You're just in a prison camp. That's what it feels like. It's not until you experience a different part of the world where they haven't got these regulations in place where it's just another world, basically. I mean, everywhere I should think eventually we'll catch up and it'll all go the same way. It's just annoying. There's nothing wrong with all these emission systems to make the air better, the air quality better. Nobody wants to be breathing in all the shit diesel fumes, and God only knows what some of these vehicles are kicking out. But when it hits you in the pocket, and that's when the problems arise, doesn't it? Because the trouble is, a lot of these diesel cars, they break down too often. That's the problem. They keep breaking down, keep going wrong, keep costing you. Russia have it down. I fixed my DPF and vaporizer a few weeks ago. I used your videos and also some of O'Reilly's to help. Save me a few quid. Thanks. Blowtorch on the vaporizer really helped. Yeah, you can clear them out if they're not too bad. They were common for blocking up on the Mark IV Mondeos, the later engines, on like 2012 onwards to 2014. Yeah, they were a right pain. Because we had a whole fleet of them, and nearly every single one of them did go wrong. We had to keep replacing them. We used to keep the vaporizers in stock, just keep replacing the bloody things. We need you back home working and paying tax. I need an operation gain. Do you know something? Out here, if you decide to just start up, as long as you're not working in a building, in a shop or something like that, you can set up something by the roadside, selling fruit or God only knows whatever you want to do. You ain't got to pay tax. So it's only if you set up properly in a building, and I think if you're earning a certain amount, you've got to pay tax. The regulations out here are a lot more relaxed compared back to the UK. They're not trying to screw you. The government here are not trying to screw you for every penny they can get. Siberget, Northern Mindanao. I'm off pigs to feed, and the rest of the day on the tractor and cultivator. Have a good one. Yeah, the sun will be up shortly here. It'll be getting blooming hot again. Can you rig up a DPF regeneration warning light on a Mark V? Can you rig up? No, I don't think so. No, it doesn't work like that. Paul Wilson, hi, hello. Remapped mine on transit instead of 2,500. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you've got to do these. Well, sometimes you do these things, didn't you? Anyway, I think I've banged on enough. So basically, the whole premise about today was, if you have a diesel with a DPF system fitted on it and it goes wrong, and it goes wrong badly, and it's going to cost an absolute fortune, it's either a case of pay the money and go and cry in a corner or something like that, or the option is you can go for a DPF delete, but just bear in mind that it's illegal to do so, and it could lead to implications further down the road, especially if you wanted to sell the car or if you took it for an MOT or something like that. So it's just worth knowing what options you possibly have. So I think I've gone through enough of it anyway. I shall think I'm going to, how long have we been running now? 1 hour, 40 minutes, flipping heck. So you know 100% when it regenerates. Jacob Tyler Press, hello, how you doing? Aurora TV. Yeah, I think I'm going to call time on the live stream. But yeah, the mate who actually had the AdBlue fault on his Citroen, he's going to just fork the money out. He says he wasn't particularly bothered about paying the actual repair bill. It's just a case of, because his mate had mentioned something, what should he do? So, as someone mentioned, on the AdBlue system, if the AdBlue system isn't working or it's disabled, will the DPF block up? Is a possibility that might not happen. So I would need more information on that. So it'd be something worth looking into. But regardless, he said he's going to have the job done properly anyway, because it's quite a new vehicle. It's probably best to have it running and working as it should be. So a lot of the case for people who actually do carry out DPF deletes, it's normally on a car that's done quite a lot of mileage, and the value of the car isn't that much anymore. So that's the big problem, isn't it? You don't want to be paying out thousands of pounds for a car that you couldn't sell it. It would cost more to fix the DPF than it would to sell the car. So Paul, there's Alan. I've enjoyed following your adventure. Great to see a stream on joys of motoring. Yeah, I used to quite like talking about the cars. It's just that I don't really have much to do with cars anymore. Yeah, out here, it would probably be quite interesting if in a garage out here, because they do things quite differently. So I don't know exactly what goes on in some of these garages, but they're not like the garages back in England. A lot of the garages are open air. The ramps they're not in like a unit. A lot of the garages I've seen, the ramps have just got like a tin roof with ramps underneath, and they'll just do they'll just fix the cars wherever they can. There are the main dealers I've seen over here in the Philippines are Toyota dealers, and they still have big flashy showrooms and all that, because Toyota's a big name over here. Bosch DTI and camshaft tools, 1.6 Cavalier taxis clutch replaced in 7 minutes. Oh, you remember them, do you? Bloody hell. Does anybody remember that? The old Vauxhall clutch where you had the little clamps, little horseshoe clamps, I'd call them. You'd fit the 3 clamps, undo the clutch, and just pull the rod out the end of the gearbox, and then just slide the clutch out without removing the gearbox. Nice and easy. That's going back. That was a good idea. Just to say thank you for doing this public service. Well, no worries, David. I'll just explain a few things sort of like to do with DPFs. I know a lot of people drive diesel cars. Even at the moment, they're demonising diesel cars. They're trying to phase them out. So you can just say, thank you, Gordon Brown, for telling everybody to buy a diesel. Like everybody in the government, they got it wrong, as they normally do. So the one thing you can take away from this is don't trust governments and all the bloody politicians. there's not often a politician that actually means well. They're all out for their bloody self. Alan's Autos, recovery and taxes can see it coming. Mondo, in our Vauxhall dealer, we had wacky races. The quickest time to change a clutch in a Cavalier taxi, 5 minutes. 3 apprentices smashed it. 4-speed boxer. One went after the 5-speed. I've never done one that bloody quick, but yeah, they were pretty good idea. I used to like doing them clutches. Lee, does the ash content build up regardless of the regens? Regen only burns off the soot. Yeah, on diesels, when the engine's running, the unburnt fuel and soot that comes out the engine, it all gets trapped in the DPF. That's what the purpose of the honeycomb, ceramic honeycomb filter to do. It traps the soot there. And obviously you have the engine ECU can read the soot loading of how much soot is being built up in the DPF. And when the soot loading in that DPF reaches a certain limit, I mean, they can read it by the pressure in the DPF. I think that's the way it goes. The ECU reads the pressure in the DPF. The more soot in the DPF that gets collected in the DPF filter, the more pressure. And when it reaches a certain pressure, the ECU will then carry out an active regen to start burning it off. Sometimes if you're driving down the motorway, you get what's called a passive regen, where it will just burn the soot off naturally if the temperature's correct and all that. But if the temperature's not correct, and the soot loading gets to a certain level, the ECU will kick in and start to burn it off. Because if it doesn't burn it off, it's going to clog the filter up, where then it'll put your car into limp mode. So as soon as the ECU reads a certain loading in that DPF, a certain soot loading, it will then obviously automatically kick in the regen to be done, whether you're going down the motorway or driving around town. Those loud insects may be cicadas. I don't know what it was, but well, I'd have to. Do you know what? I want to get the noise, because put it this way: that the trees are about, I would say, I don't know, 100 meters away. They're quite distance back, and sometimes during the day when it's really hot, there's this really, really loud, high-pitched noise. You know that noise a cricket makes? It's like that 100 times louder. It's really bizarre. And I'm thinking that, I don't know whether it's some kind of machine or something that someone's using, but it's not. It's something in the trees over there. So, but it really is flipping loud. I'm going to look further into that. Is it illegal to tamper? It is illegal to tamper, but is it legal to fix it? Oh, you can fix them. If your DPF's faulty, it's not illegal to fix it. You know, if you have to replace the DPF, then you can replace it. That's not a problem. You just got to replace it with a legal DPF. Like if you went to the dealership and bought a brand new DPF and replaced your old one, or any of the sensors on the system, it's perfectly fine to do that. What we mean by making it, if it's illegal, is if you're taking something off the system or removing the filter and leaving so there's no filter or something like that, or messing around with the software, or that's what makes it illegal when you're altering the system. A great believer in AdBlue additives preventing crystals, and buy your AdBlue indoors and not badly stored in outside petrol forecourts. Even fresh pump it at nozzles are prone to be contaminated. Yeah, that AdBlue is a funny old stuff, isn't it? If you drop that on the floor, it all kind of crystallizes, doesn't it? And it kind of like mutates and grows. It's pretty horrible bloody stuff. Lee, they say that ash does. Would it fail the MOT emissions? No, not always. If the I've said this, if the engines, if you had a DPF delete done, if the engine is running perfectly fine and there's no issues with it, there's a high chance the car would still pass an MOT test, smoke test. Some people would put some Red-X in their fuel or something like that to clean the injectors, give it a good run down the motorway before they took it for the MOT test. And there's a high chance it would still pass. However, if the engine was ropey and not running very well, or the engine was just badly worn, then there's a good chance it might not pass. It's a bit of a dodgy subject there. It all depends what condition your engine's in. My Mark 5 67 Mondeo is not had blue. No, it's probably they're still running on the before the AdBlue was actually come out. That's why they got them bloody great EGR valves on them, so they didn't have to fit the AdBlue tanks. Funniest thing I saw was an old Land Rover Disco pumping out loads of soot. He had a sticker of Greta Thunberg. Classic. I like that one. Hi then from Forest Dean. Hello to you, Collie House. How you doing? Best thing to do, DPF EGR delete and a stage 1 remap. Thank me later. Yeah, just saying that, some people who do have the DPF deletes done, as you know, with a lot of these engine ECUs, you can increase the horsepower as well. So I know people who have had the DPFs done, they will have the DPF delete done all properly, have the ECU remapped, and at the same time step up the horsepower from the ECU. So they've then got a very quick diesel car. So yeah, I know. You ain't got to tell me. I do know. I've seen it all. From sunny South Derbyshire. Hello to you. Anyway, I think I'm gonna cut this live stream now. It's just going on a bit. I've said what I had to say. Do you ever have to clean the map sensor on Mark IV Mondeo? I think I have in the past looked at them to see if they were blocked, but I haven't actually had a blocked one. I did have a blocked map sensor on a BMW X3. It was right at the back of the bloody manifold in a difficult place to get to. That was absolutely block solid with carbon. And that was causing the lack of power. But I've not actually had a blocked one on a Mark IV. Remember a lady was told to top up her oil and bought 5 litres from the garage and poured it in the engine and ran on that and tried to stop it. It removed an injector pipe. Bloody hell. Yeah. That's not the first time that's happened. Bloody hell. I had a woman once, this is back in days of Marshalls, the mother told the daughter to fill the engine with water, and she did just that. She filled the engine full of water right up to the top of the rocker cover. It was funny as hell. Dropped a pot and broke. It's actually hot here. Mondi t-shirt. Dan, just curious, how much do you need to survive in the Philippines living cheaply? Oh, bloody hell. It's you're asking the $64,000 question now. I think it all depends, doesn't it? It depends if you're renting somewhere, how you like to eat, whether you go out, what other the trouble is there's all kinds of expenses crop up here that you just don't anticipate. So I mean, it's I can't really put a figure on it, but I think to be even if I was to say you need £1,000 a month, if you're very frugal, you could probably do that, but chances are you'd need more. It all depends how you're prepared to live. It's not easy for a Westerner to come to this country and live like a Filipino. You've got to understand that most Filipinos, they all got their family and they're all family orientated and they all help each other. So a lot of Filipinos can live very, very cheaply indeed. Us Westerners come over here and we just simply cannot live like that. So it's a difficult question. I think if you want to find that out for yourself, would be to wherever you're going to go there, or come here, spend a few months here, and then you'll see if it works for you and what you can spend, because it's you can't just put a figure on it. You don't know what's going to happen or how you're going to decide to live. A lot of us Westerners, we want to live in kind of comfort that we're used to back at home, and you're not going to get that out here. Especially where I am, a lot of people that live out here, they are living in nothing more than a tin shed, and there's insects everywhere, there's mosquitoes everywhere, there's no running water in a lot of cases. You know, bloody hell, since I've been here, this house has running water, but because there's been a drought, there's been no water in the tank. It hasn't got mains water coming here. There's a tank outside that gets filled up with rainwater. And since I've been here, I've been washing in out of a bucket. I get a bucket and a little dipper, and you just pour the water over you. It's lovely in the afternoons because the water out of the barrel outside is like 30 degrees temperature. So it's just like having a hot shower outside. But it's not like England where you can just go and turn the shower on, and you know, everything is more of a challenge, to put it mildly. But once you spend enough time out here, you kind of acclimatise yourself to it. But money wise, it's really difficult to say. I think the only way you're ever going to know is to actually spend a little bit of time out here with a certain budget in mind, and see if you can live like that. Then you'll know for sure. But I wouldn't like to put a figure on anything. Everyone's different in what they're going to spend. Mike, the AdBlue catalyst is after the DPF on those that have it. Steve, remove DPF, remove AdBlue if required, and get a remap. Passes MOT too. Simple. Done it on my ML320. Yeah. I've seen quite a few that have been done, and it's all worked out fine. They have no problems at all. So it's the ones that are done properly, even though it's illegal. It's the ones that are done properly. Then you can carry on, and everything's great. But I have seen cases, you know, if it's not done properly, then it's going to cause you more problems. So you've got to find the right person to do the job. The most likely DPF failing to regen is burned out pressure differential pipes. They were on like I know they were on the Mark IV Mondeos. Not so much the later ones from 2012 on, but from like 2010, 2011, on the earlier DPFs on the Mark IVs, the DPF pressure hoses, they I've had many of them where they've had holes burnt in them, and they've just caused the DPF to block up. So yeah, them, and they're not cheap either, them hoses. They're like well over £100, and I think you've got to buy them independently as well. Yeah, I've done quite a few of them. Kenny, you need to give a modern diesel an Italian tune-up. Did that on my 200k mile Mark IV Mondeo. Yeah. Love my Mark IV, and it pulls like a train, but when it smokes, it's like a popside pipe. I reckon the EGR. Yeah, it might be worth just taking it off and giving it a clean. Tucson went in for new pads and discs, front and rear. Then they told me about a leak at the water pump. Oh my God. Fuck me, 15,000 ZAR. I don't know what that is, but later it sounds a lot. Yeah. Neil, hello. Miss my Mondi 2.5 V6. Nice engine they are. Regen, what's that? When I should change, I think glove plugs. Do you reckon do it by myself? No, certainly not. If you've never done anything like that, then stay the hell away. Get someone who knows what they're doing to do that, because glow plugs are a funny old thing, and they don't always just unscrew and come out. You can get glow plugs that are seized in, believe me. And if you get a glow plug that's stuck in the head, then you could be in a whole world of shit. It might be worth getting someone who knows what they're doing to tackle that. I think we are better just getting a Dacia Duster. Do you know what? You see these cars and you think they're cheap and probably very nasty, but the question is, do they keep going without problems? Can you just keep driving them? You know, like the old larders. You just want to get somewhere without no problems. Mark V, I done work York to Doncaster. Mark V, I drove York, Doncaster, stopped 5 minutes, then back to York. Bloody hell, that's going some. Hi from Neil in school. Hello. Right, I think I'm going to call time on this because it's dragging on a bit. I banged on a bit about DPFs and DPF deletes and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to make another drink and then go out in the sunshine and sweat my ass off for the rest of the day. So thank you everybody for joining the live stream. It's been a pleasure. If I find anything more to do with, I know it's just, I do like talking about cars because that's what I used to do. So if anything else crops up, I will bring it up so we can have a chat about it. And I know it's entertainment for everybody anyway. So anything interesting, I will try to say something later on as things come along. But anyway, have a, I guess most of you are in the UK. Have a good night, should I say. Monday morning tomorrow. For those of you who've got to get up and go to work, then good luck. Have a good week. And I'll see you all in the next live stream. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one out there. Adios, people.